Hi students, this is Mrs. Oberly with our lesson on proportional reasoning. Today, by the end of the lesson, you will be able to use proportional reasoning to solve problems involving ratios in various contexts. Please pause this video and write this learning target down in your planner. Today, the context that we're going to be focusing on are just tables. So you're going to rate yourself just on how well you can use proportional reasoning to solve problems involving tables. All right, once everyone has written down the learning target, you can play for the one example that I'd like you just to watch. So all pencils are down, eyes are up on the screen. Just watch as I think this through because you're going to be trying one like this in a minute. So the problem says the amount of salt used in a soup recipe is shown in the table below. If the recipe stays consistent, how much salt should be used to make 8 quarts of soup? Well, we want to think about the relationships we have going on between the quarts of soup and the amounts of salt. So for instance, I could rewrite 3/4 teaspoon of salt as 0.75 using my calculator. And remember from yesterday, we like to find a ratio of the salt to soup. So the amount of salt per quart of soup. Remember, we call that our unit rate. So if I want to find the amount of salt per quart of soup, I would divide. So if I use my calculator to divide this, or we could write that as a fraction and talk about multiplying by the reciprocal, I find out that there is 1/4 teaspoon per quart of soup. But that helps me because if I know that we have 1/4 teaspoon for a quart of soup as my unit rate, then I can use that unit rate to fill in this unknown value in the table. Think back to what you did yesterday with your crab walk table. Do you remember how we get from this number to this number? Well, we're going to multiply by our unit rate. So times by 0.25. And 8 times 0.25 is 2. And if I look at my table, does that seem reasonable? That it would go up 1/2 here if it's going up 2 quarts? Absolutely, because for every 1 quart, it's going to be 1/4 teaspoon. So for 2 quarts of increase, we know it's going to increase by 1/2 teaspoon. So that absolutely makes sense. So remember, you're first going to find your unit rate. So step 1 is to find your unit rate. Once you've found your unit rate, you're going to use your unit rate to multiply the number of quarts to find our outcome in our table here. If we were working backwards, the opposite of multiplication would be to divide. So I'm going to have you right now pause the video, and person closest to the window, I want you to tell your partner what was the first thing we did with that table. I'll show you the table again. And then what was the second thing we did to find the unknown in our table. Pause the video, and then once everyone has had their window share with their neighbor what that is, steps 1 and 2, then play the video to reveal the answer. So step 1 was to find the unit rate, the teaspoons of salt per quart, and step 2 was to multiply that unit rate by the values in our soup column to get our unknown for salt. So multiply our unit rate. If we were going backwards, the opposite of multiply would be to divide. But in this case, we are going forward. All right, good luck, students.